Hey there everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. I'm going to be sharing two different ideas that I created with the Simon Says Stamp May 2022 card kit. It is a really pretty kit. It's containing a lot of fun products, including a new ink cube holder. And not only am I making two different cards, but I'm also sharing two completely different techniques. So the first technique is going to be showing you how I made this colorful background using the brushed flowers stamp set that's included in the kit and some of the mini ink cubes. I love this stamp set with its beautiful bold flowers, and it's perfect for creating gorgeous floral arrangements, whether you want to make something completely covering the background or you want to stamp just a single flower, you can do that too. The new Simon Says Stamp ink cube holder is super fantastic for using your mini ink cubes. And bonus, you actually get 4 mini ink cubes that are exclusive only to the kit. You can only get these cubes when you purchase the kit. These little ink cubes are small versions of 4 of Simon's Pawsitively saturated ink colors. So the ink cube holder is great for not just using it to hold your ink pads in place while you're ink blending, but it's also great for keeping your ink pads contained while you're also stamping and keeping them from flying around on your desk. I really like that. You can fit pretty much any sized ink cube into this, including Tim Holtz Distress and other brands. All of Simon Says Stamp's existing ink cubes also fit into this as well. So I'm going to start assembling some of these images from the stamp set and forming a pattern. We're going to work on this in stages, and so I want to first start by clustering a few images together to start forming my pattern. I'm using a MISTI tool to help do my stamping. I'm going to color each of these individual stamps with a different color of ink. So I'm first using Lucky, and I'm going to stamp the leaves. I stamped all the leaves with Lucky and also Sage ink, and you'll see that in a little bit. Then for the flowers, I'm going to start bringing in some of those nice bright colors. Ocean was the first one that I selected, and this is a really nice pretty blue. These 4 colors that are included in the kit match up so well together, and they were the main colors that I used throughout this project. I did also bring in a little bit of Melon, which is an older Simon Says Stamp ink, still available, and it's a gorgeous color. It matched really nicely with these. So I'm going to pair that in here as well. And as you can see, while I'm stamping and using another color, all of the other colors that I'm using today are all sat inside of my ink cube holder so that I'm not losing them on my desk or dropping them on the floor. Some of the images I did stamp a couple times, either because I didn't stamp them correctly the first time or because I wanted a slightly darker impression. So you'll see me do that here and there as we're stamping. That Sage ink, I did pull out the larger sized ink pad because this is not available in a mini ink cube. So I'm going to stamp that with the full size ink pad, and I did stamp it twice because I wanted the Sage ink to be slightly darker than the Lucky. So by stamping it twice, I got that effect. So I'm going to fill up this entire card with these flowers, using the different colors and creating a really nice pretty background. Once I have the background filled in with a lot of the larger images, then I started bringing in smaller images and filling in some of those nooks and crannies that have a little bit more extra space. Finally, I also used 2 of the little dot stamps that are included in the stamp set and a latte ink pad from Simon's Pawsitively Saturated Ink Collection. And I'm going to fill in the even tinier spaces with those dots. And this just kind of fills the background in, and that light latte color isn't too distracting from the rest of the colors, but it complements everything nicely. I'm using a Simon Says Stamp rectangle and circle die to create a frame with this background panel. Yes, I know after all that stamping, we are going to cut into it, but that's because I want to stamp a sentiment in the center of this panel, and I want that to be stamped on white, and I thought it would look pretty to have it recessed. So this is going to get attached onto my white card base, but I'm going to start first by lining up this panel onto the card base before adhering anything together, and I'm going to line up my stamps that are going to go inside of that circle, and I'm going to stamp those first before I do any attaching. This way I know that the sentiment's going to line up perfectly in the center here, and everything's going to be nice, even, and straight. So I stamped one of the sentiments from the stamp set with rose ink, and I did stamp it twice to make sure I got a really intense impression. Once I have the sentiment stamped, then I also brought in a heart, and this is also part of the brushed flowers set. I'll use some citrine ink, which is the yellow, and stamp that underneath sending hugs. So now we have this really cute greeting. It's going to look absolutely beautiful recessed behind this panel. I used foam tape to create that dimension, and I'll just go ahead and attach this right onto the center of my card. And because we did all the aligning ahead of time, everything is perfectly centered and looks fabulous. So now I'm going to just embellish this very simply by adding a little twine bow. The twine is not included in the kit. I just had some laying around in my stash, so I grabbed some of that. Pick whatever twine you like, and I'm just going to glue that right down in the center portion of the circle right along the bottom area. And I just used some craft tacky glue from Simon Says Stamp to adhere that down. How cute is that? It's super simple, didn't take that long to make, and it's honestly one of those cards you could make multiples of and create a whole bunch really simply and easily. Now this was fun and very colorful, but let's go a little bit more toned down. And when I say toned down, maybe a little bit more, less colors, but still very bold and bright. I have this beautiful background created by using embossed resist. So let's jump in and talk about that next. So I have some doll pink cardstock that's included in the kit, and I'm arranging some of those stamps onto the doll pink cardstock. And what we're going to do is we're going to stamp them with embossing ink. Now I did prep the surface of that cardstock with a powder tool prior to stamping, so that way I don't have any oil on the paper. I'm going to start stamping these flowers, then bringing them over to my clear embossing powder, which is part of the kit, and I'll sprinkle that embossing powder over top of the stamped images. I'm going to work in sections with this because I didn't want the ink to dry, so I'm just going to go ahead and heat set this section and then work on stamping another section until I have the entire paper covered with these stamped flowers and leaves, and they're all embossed with the clear embossing powder. This didn't take too long. It was a little bit tedious to kind of work in the stages, but I think the end result was absolutely stunning. So now I'm going to bring in those stamps once again and start filling in more of the paper and creating this really nice pattern of flowers and leaves. In between each stamping and embossing, I went through and added more powder to the paper just to make sure I wasn't transferring any of my finger oils onto the paper. So every time I went to restamp more flowers, I always prepped the surface of the paper. Once I have the entire paper covered with those flowers, I brought in some of the ocean ink and a blending tool, and I'm going to cover this background with the ink. Because we did the clear embossing, we are resisting the ink that's being put on top of these flowers. So we're trapping the pink color of the cardstock underneath the embossing powder. And then once we buff off any ink that's sitting on top of that embossing powder, we're going to reveal that pink color, and we have those beautiful pink flowers now on top of this purple background, because of course blue and pink make purple. When we added that ocean ink on top of this doll pink cardstock, we turned it to purple. So it's a really cool way to add a nice bit of contrast to this background by using your inks and your cardstock together to create this really cool look. I did use the dot pattern to go ahead and add that in between some of the flowers and leaves. I used the ocean ink to stamp that, and then I also brought in a white gel pen to add little dots of white in between everything. So here's our background all completed. We will cut this down with a die, and I'll show you that here shortly. The next thing I did was I stamped the sentiment from the stamp set first with some ocean ink, and I only stamped the top 2/3 of it. The bottom third I left open, and I'm going to re-stamp this sentiment right back over top of the blue stamping with rose ink. And now the bottom portion of the sentiment is pink and the rest of it is purple, so it matches really nicely with our background. That background is going to get die cut with a scalloped border. I'm actually using a rectangle die to do this because I didn't have a border die that had a chunky scallop like this. I'm just going to partially die cut this background, so that way only the bottom portion of that scallop gets die cut, and so then everything else won't be die cut. So now we just have that scallop border along the bottom portion of the card. Very simple and easy to do. I'm going to align this onto a A2 top folding card. This is a white card base. It goes really well with those white dots that we have going on here. I used foam tape to attach that down so that it has a little bit of lift along the bottom portion of the card. And then my sentiment also is getting popped up with foam tape too. I'm tying a bit of twine around this card as well. I thought it would tie these two cards together and make them feel cohesive. I really liked how the twine looked with this style of flowers as well, so I'm just going to go ahead and tie that into a bow after wrapping it around my card a few times, and then I'll trim off any of the excess that's hanging there. My last embellishment was to add some Nouveau drops. This is white Nouveau drops, and I'm putting those on the centers of all the flowers. So these will have some nice dimension, and it'll also go really well with the dots in the background and the white of the card base below. So this is my finished card. I love the shine of that embossed resist, and I just love how that pink is captured inside of that embossing powder. We've got that nice contrast. And then here's the other card we created. So before I go, I'm curious, which one is your favorite? Which one are you going to try to make? I hope you were inspired by these ideas using the May 2022 card kit from Simon Says Stamp. If you're interested in the kit, I do have it linked below in the video description, along with a link over to my blog if you're watching this on YouTube, and you can find out more details about the cards and also still pictures. Be sure to check that out. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I will see you all again very soon with more to share. Until next time, friends, have a fabulous day. Bye.